India may be the most confusing future superpower on Earth. It has billionaires, space missions, nuclear weapons, giant tech companies, world-class engineers, one of the biggest armies in the world, and a digital payment system so advanced that people can buy tea from a street vendor with a phone in seconds. At the same time, it still has deep poverty, overcrowded cities, weak infrastructure in many regions, polluted air, informal jobs, village economies, and millions of young people trying to climb into the modern world before the latter runs out of space. That contradiction is the whole story. India is not becoming powerful because it already looks rich. It is becoming powerful because the world is running out of countries that can offer what India has: scale, talent, cheap labor, a massive domestic market, geopolitical importance, and a population young enough to still change the direction of history. China already became the world's factory. America still dominates technology, finance, and military power. Europe has wealth but is aging. Japan and South Korea are advanced but demographically shrinking. India is different. It is huge, young, chaotic, ambitious, and still unfinished. That is why everyone is watching it. The United States wants India as a counterweight too. China, Apple wants India as a manufacturing base. Global investors want India's consumer market. Gulf countries want Indian workers. Tech companies want Indian engineers. Energy markets watch India's demand. Climate experts watch its coal use. Politicians watch its elections because India is the world's largest democracy. India is no longer just a poor country with potential. It is becoming one of the central arenas where the 21st century will be decided. But the key word is becoming. India has not fully arrived yet. The country's biggest strength is also its biggest pressure: people. India is now the world's most populous country, and that gives it a scale most nations cannot imagine. A product that works in India can reach hundreds of millions of customers. A policy mistake can affect more people than the entire population of most continents. A new road, airport, payment app, factory, or school system can change the lives of tens of millions. Scale turns everything into destiny. For decades, people talked about India's population as a burden. To many people, too little infrastructure, too much poverty. But in a world where rich countries are aging, India's population looks different. It is a labor force, a consumer market, a talent pool, an army, a voter base, and a geopolitical asset. The problem is that people only become an advantage if the country can educate, employ, and connect them. That is India's real test. A young population can become a demographic dividend, but it can also become frustration. If millions of young people enter the labor market and do not find good jobs, the same energy that could build the economy can turn into anger, migration pressure, and political instability. This is why India's rise cannot be measured only by GDP. The real question is whether India can turn people into productivity. India's first global success was not manufacturing like China. It was services. The world already knows Indian talent through IT, software outsourcing, call centers, engineering, medicine, finance, consulting, and global tech leadership. Some of the most important companies in America are led by Indian-born executives. Indian engineers helped build parts of the digital world. Cities like Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Pune, Chennai, and Gurgaon became connected to global technology networks. This gave India a powerful image, a country of coders, engineers, and English-speaking talent. That image matters because English gave India a bridge to the global economy. A large educated class could work with American and European companies in a way many other developing countries could not. India did not need to become rich first to sell intelligence abroad. It could export services through cables, offices, and people. This is one reason India grew differently from China. China built factories for the world. India built back offices, software teams, and service systems for the world. Both models created growth, but they created different problems. Manufacturing can absorb huge numbers of workers, including people without elite education. High-end services create wealth and global influence, but they do not automatically employ hundreds of millions of people. India's IT success is real, but it cannot carry the entire country alone. That is why manufacturing has become so important. India wants to become the next big factory alternative to China. The logic is obvious. Global companies do not want to depend too much on one country, especially after trade wars, pandemic disruptions, and geopolitical tension. If companies need a second major production base, India wants to be that place. Apple is the clearest symbol. iPhones being assembled in India are not just a business story. They are a signal that global supply chains are shifting. India wants to move from being the world's software office to being a serious manufacturing power, but this is harder than slogans make it sound. Manufacturing requires roads, ports, power, land, suppliers, skilled workers, predictable rules, fast customs, good logistics, and management discipline. China spent decades building that ecosystem. India is improving fast, but the country still struggles with bureaucracy, uneven infrastructure, state-level differences, and the difficulty of moving millions of workers from informal work into formal industry. Still, the direction is clear. India does not want to be only a market where foreign companies sell products. It wants to be a country where products are made, designed, financed, and consumed at scale. That ambition is visible in electronics, pharmaceuticals, automotive production, renewable energy, defense manufacturing, and space technology. India already has one of the world's strongest generic pharmaceutical industries, which makes it important to global medicine. It has a space program that can deliver serious missions at relatively low cost. It has a growing startup ecosystem, and its digital public infrastructure has become one of the most interesting experiments in the world. The digital story is especially important. India built a system that connects identity, bank accounts, mobile phones, and instant payments. UPI changed everyday economic life by making digital payments cheap and easy. A small shop, taxi driver, or street vendor can accept money instantly without needing the expensive card networks that dominate in many countries. This is not just convenience. It pulls more people into the formal economy. It creates data trails. It makes transactions faster. It helps small businesses operate digitally. It gives the state new tools for welfare payments. Taxation and financial inclusion. In many rich countries, payments still feel surprisingly old. In India, parts of daily money movement feel like the future. That is the strange thing about India. The country can look behind and ahead at the same time. A person can walk past broken sidewalks, traffic chaos, and informal markets, then pay instantly through a QR code using one of the most advanced payment systems on Earth. India is not modernizing evenly. It is leapfrogging in patches. This makes the country hard to understand from the outside. If you look only at poverty, you miss the ambition. If you look only at startups and billionaires, you miss the struggle. If you look only at chaos, you miss the systems being built underneath it. India's rise is messy because India itself is messy. It has dozens of major languages, huge religious diversity, deep caste realities, sharp regional differences, and a political system that has to manage more voters than any other democracy. Governing India is not like governing a small, rich country. It is closer to trying to run a continent. That complexity slows things down. But it also gives India resilience. China can move faster because its system is more centralized. India moves through argument, elections, courts, state governments, protests, media noise, bureaucracy, and compromise. This makes the country frustrating, but it also makes it harder to reduce India to one leader, one plan, or one mistake. India's democracy is part of its global appeal, especially for the West. America and Europe see India as a partner that can help balance China without being a Western puppet. India buys Russian oil, works with the United States, competes with China, trades with the Gulf, speaks to Europe, and protects its own strategic independence. That is another key part of India's identity. India does not want to belong to someone else's camp. It wants to become its own pole. This comes from history. India was colonized, exploited, and ruled by Britain for generations. Independence created a deep instinct against dependence. Modern India wants investment, technology, and alliances, but it does not want to be treated as a junior partner. That is why India's foreign policy can look contradictory. It can join Western-led conversations about China while still maintaining ties with Russia. It can speak the language of democracy while defending its own interests in ways that frustrate Washington. It can welcome Apple and global capital while pushing domestic manufacturing and national champions. India is not trying to become another Singapore or another South Korea. It is too big for that. It is trying to become India, a civilizational scale power with its own rules. The economic opportunity is massive. Hundreds of millions of Indians are still moving upward. More people are getting smartphones, bank accounts, education, electricity, internet access, and consumer aspirations. A young family buying its first scooter, air conditioner, smartphone, insurance plan, online course, or apartment is part of a gigantic domestic demand story. This is why companies care so much. India is not only an export base. It is a future consumer superpower. The middle class is still uneven and often overestimated, but the direction is real. As incomes rise, demand for travel, housing, health care, finance, entertainment, education, beauty, cars, electronics, and food services can grow for decades. That is the dream investors see. But India's weaknesses are just as real. Jobs are the biggest. 1. The country needs millions of decent jobs every year, not just elite tech careers. Too much work remains informal. Many people are employed, but not productively enough. Women's participation in the labor force has historically been low compared with what India needs. Education quality is uneven. Some graduates have degrees, but not the skills employers want. This creates a dangerous gap between aspiration and reality. Young Indians see global lifestyles on their phones. They know what success looks like. They want better lives, better cities, better jobs, and more dignity. If the economy cannot absorb them, disappointment becomes political. Infrastructure is the second challenge. India has improved roads, airports, railways, ports, and digital systems, but the needs are enormous. Cities are crowded. Traffic can be brutal. Pollution is severe. Water stress is a growing issue. Housing quality varies widely. Industrial logistics still need major upgrades. A superpower cannot run only on population and ambition. It needs physical systems that work. Energy is the third challenge. India's economy needs huge amounts of power, and coal still plays a major role in electricity generation. At the same time, India is expanding renewable energy because it cannot ignore climate pressure, pollution, import dependence, and future energy security. This creates one of the world's hardest energy dilemmas. Rich countries became rich using fossil fuels, then told developing countries to decarbonize. India argues that it still needs growth, power, and industrialization. That is not an excuse. It is the central conflict of global climate politics. If India grows with dirty energy, the planet suffers. If India is forced to slow growth too much, hundreds of millions of people pay the price. So India has to do something extremely difficult: build, electrify, industrialize, and decarbonize at the same time. Few countries have ever faced a challenge at that scale. The fourth challenge is social tension. India's rise is tied to national confidence, but confidence can turn into division. Religious politics, caste inequality, regional differences, and pressure on institutions can affect how the world sees India and how Indians see each other. A country this large cannot afford to waste energy on internal fragmentation. For India to become a true superpower, it needs not only growth, but cohesion. This is where the story becomes bigger than economics. India is not just trying to get richer. It is trying to prove that a huge, poor, democratic, diverse country can become powerful without following the Chinese model. If it succeeds, it changes the global imagination. It shows that development does not have to mean centralized authoritarian industrialization. It can be noisy, uneven, democratic, and still powerful. But success is not guaranteed. India could become a manufacturing giant, or it could remain trapped with too many low-quality jobs. It could become a digital public infrastructure model for the world, or it could create surveillance and exclusion risks. It could become a clean energy leader, or it could remain locked into coal. It could become a trusted global partner, or it could become harder to work with if domestic politics becomes too tense. That is why India is so fascinating. It is not a finished superpower. It is a country under construction while the whole world watches. China rose when globalization wanted cheap manufacturing. India is rising in a more complicated time. Supply chains are being redesigned. AI is changing labor. Climate pressure is rising. Geopolitics is dividing markets, and every major power wants partners but fears dependence. That makes India valuable. It can provide workers, consumers, engineers, soldiers, factories, markets, data, diplomacy, and scale. Very few countries can offer all of that at once. But the same scale that makes India attractive also makes every problem larger. A small mistake becomes huge. A slow reform affects millions. A weak school system limits generations. A polluted city becomes a national health crisis. A failed job strategy becomes a political time bomb. India's future will not be clean, simple, or smooth. It will be noisy, crowded, contradictory, and massive. And maybe that is exactly why it matters. The world is used to superpowers that look organized from the outside. India may become something different, a superpower that is still chaotic, still poor in many places, still arguing with itself, but too large, too young, and too important to ignore. That is the real story. India is trying to become a global power before it becomes a fully developed country. If it can turn its population into skill, its digital systems into productivity, its factories into exports, its cities into engines, and its democracy into stability, it may become one of the defining powers of this century. If it cannot, the world's biggest population could become the world's biggest missed opportunity. India is not just rising. India is being tested at the scale of history,